At the start of these Wrath of the Lich King class change videos, I say, wow, this class has gone through an immense amount of changes between TBC and Wrath of the Lich King. This one really has. Affliction, Demonology, and Destruction are all very different and play very different in Wrath of the Lich King compared to what they do in TBC. And the Warlock throughout the patches between 3.0 and 3.3.5 went through massive changes. But ultimately, the Demonology Warlock brings spell power, does massive damage, and the Felguard absolutely pumps. The Affliction Warlock can absolutely destroy single target, multi-target, and when it gets into its execute range, it's an absolute beast. And what the Destruction Warlock lacks in terms of a DPS cooldown, it makes up with high sustained damage, and it can actually bring replenishment. Right, so what we're going to look at is how abilities that you've already got have changed in Wrath of the Lich King because they've gone through some extensive changes. We're going to look at sort of the overview of changes that have gone on. That'll make more sense in a minute. We're going to look at how pets have changed as well, because each demon individually has actually had some tweaks, some buffs. They've all had buffs, to be honest with you. Then we're going to look at how the talents have changed. So today we're focusing on Destruction, and then we'll look at glyphs that are relevant to Destruction. Now, all I'm going to do for the Affliction and Demonology video is use this first portion of the video at the start of both of those as well, because all the changes I'm about to cover apply to all specs. A quick thank you to you guys that have joined the channel as a member, with all your names scrolling along in the banner at the bottom. More on how you can support the channel at the end of the video. So firstly, just a few minor changes, but ones that you probably will want to know about. First of all, there's no longer demon trainers in the game. They've not been removed, so the actual NPC is still there and will give class relevant quests and stuff like that, but your pets now just automatically learn their abilities as you level up and as they level up. Also, the quest to acquire this beautiful mount is no longer needed, so you actually just learn this as a skill. Of course, you'll get the epic version at 40, and you'll get the normal version at 20. I appreciate this isn't the most exciting change in the world, but if you do decide to start a Warlock in Wrath of the Lich King, you no longer need to do the Imp quest. You can actually learn your Imp at level 1, as long as you've got 95 copper to spare. In TBC, you could get an ability called Avoidance for your Felguard. Well, you can now get this for all pets, which reduces the damage the summoned demon takes by 90% from AoE damage. In between 3.0 and 3.3.5, all the pets were scaled and tuned and tweaked until they're at their final state that they are now. So over that period of time, they've had their attack power increased, they've had their damage increased, they've had their health increased. So bottom line is, all the pets do feel stronger in Wrath of the Lich King than they do in TBC. An individual example of this would be with the Voidwalker. Now, we know historically the Voidwalker holding threat can be a bit of an issue. One of the specific changes for the pets was the amount of attack power that the Voidwalker gains from your spell power is now increased by 45%. So it can actually hold aggro quite efficiently now. Blood Pack for your Imp is now raid-wide instead of just party-wide. The Fell Hunt has actually gone through considerable change, so it now brings a buff called Fell Intelligence, which increases party and raid members' intellect by 52 and spirit by 70. So it's nice to actually bring a spirit and intellect buff. And as an Affliction Warlock, you will be using the Fell Hunter because of its new ability called Shadow Bite, which bites the enemy, causing 112 to 159 damage, plus an additional 15% damage for each of your damage over time effects on the target. This is on a 2-second cooldown. You've still got Devour Magic and Spell Lock. Sacrifice on your Voidwalker has now changed as well, so it's a 1-minute cooldown. It sacrifices a portion of the Voidwalker's health, giving its master a shield, which will absorb 8,365 damage for 30 seconds. And while the shield holds, spellcasting will not be interrupted by damage. So as you can see, I can now sacrifice a small portion, I might add, and I now get the shield, which is definitely a lot better than having to worry about resummoning him. So that's pet changes out of the way. Now looking at abilities, there's been lots and lots of ability changes. So first of all, Curse of Recklessness was removed in 3.1, and it's now baked into Curse of Weakness. So Curse of Weakness still reduces the melee attack power of the target that's got the curse on, but it also now reduces their armor by 5% as well. Drain Soul's also changed, and it acts as an execute ability for Affliction Warlocks. So it drains the soul of the target, causing 815 to 820 shadow damage over 14 seconds. If a target is at or below 25% health, Drain Soul causes 4 times the normal damage. If the target dies while being drained and yields experience or honor, the caster gains a soul shard. But also on top of this, each time the Drained Soul damages the target, it has a chance to generate a soul shard. Soul shards are required for other spells, as we know. So as you can see, you can be chilling in Ironforge, just spamming Drain Soul on a target dummy, and you got a chance of actually getting soul shards. And while we're talking about soul shards, you now can only carry a maximum of 32. I say only, you're going to be generating them quick, getting rid of them quick, so 32 is absolutely fine. Banish has changed slightly, so when you actually recast Banish on a target that's already banished, it will now break. Just nice if someone uses a max rank Banish, you haven't got to stand there for like 30 seconds waiting for it, so that's a welcome change. So the Soul Shatter cooldown, which reduces your threat by 50% for all enemies within 50 yards, has now been reduced to 3 minutes, down from 5. The Soulstone cooldown and effect on a target has now been reduced from 30 minutes down to 15, which just means you can use it more frequently. Although it doesn't actually show it on the tooltip, immolate periodic damage can actually now critical strike. Life tap used to scale with your spirit, it now scales with your spell power, which is definitely a welcome change. So as you can see, in around about 4,000 gear score, my Warlock converts nearly 3,000 health into mana. And there's something really interesting coming with life tap as well, because outside of wanting to get mana from it, there's a juicy glyph that we're definitely going to be talking about. Corruption is now instant cast for all Warlock specs. No longer do you need talents to actually reduce the cast time of it down to be an instant cast. Curse of Tongues now only reduces casting speed of spells by 30%, and it lasts 30 seconds. This is to actually bring it in line with other classes that have got cast speed reduction abilities. Curse of Elements still decreases actual resistances on the target, and it still increases the amount of magic damage taken, so it now increases the damage taken by 13% instead of 10%, and this is actually to bring it in line with the damage taken debuffs from Boomkins and Unholy Decays. Just a minor one, but Death Coil used to give you back the same amount of health in damage that Death Coil caused. Now it actually grants 300% of the damage caused, so it's a lot more noticeable. So Drain Mana has been reworked much like Mana Burn as for Priest, so what it does now is transfers 3% of the target's maximum mana every second from the target to the caster, up to a maximum of 6% of the caster's max mana every second, whereas it's a fixed value in TBC. Summoning your Inferno has now been reduced to a 10-minute cooldown, down from a whopping 1 hour cooldown in TBC. Firestone and Spellstone have both gone through quite a big rework. So Firestone, what it does now, it can be used on an enchanted weapon, I'll just put that out there as well. While applied to the target weapon, it increases damage dealt by direct spells by 1% and spell critical strike rating by 49. And then you've got Create Spellstone, which while applied to the target, increases the damage dealt by periodic spells by 1% and spell haste rating by 60. So in all fairness, even as Destruction, if you was lacking on the haste rating a little bit, you could even use Spellstone. You've got options. Both Demon Armor and Demon Skin, which don't get me wrong, Demon Skin's only going to be used while leveling. Both of these have gone for a rework where they do still give you an increased armor. They don't give you an increased shadow resistance anymore, but instead they increase the amount of health generated through spells and effects by 20%. So Fel Armor's also gone through quite a juicy change where it increases the spell power by 180, but now it also increases your spell power equal to 30% of your spirit. So spirit becomes incredibly important for Warlocks in Wrath of the Lich King, as you'll find out more of in this video. In addition, you regain 2% of your maximum health every 5 seconds. And the final one really worth noting is Ritual of Summoning and how it actually works in Wrath of the Lich King. So it now summons a little wardrobe that everybody can click on and help you summon, basically, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown. Whew, see what I mean about the amount of changes? An absolute immense amount of changes, and all positive. There's not a single one there that you're like, oh, that's not very good. All really, really good changes. Now, there's only 2 abilities that you get, 2 new abilities that I'm going to talk about. I mean, technically you get loads of new abilities because so many of them have changed so drastically they're almost new. You know, like Firestone and Spellstone, for example. All of a sudden they're actually incredibly useful. But you get 2 main new abilities. Let's look at those and then we'll move on to the talents. So you get Shadow Flame firstly, which is not too bad, but you're not really going to be using it that much. So on a 15-second cooldown, targets in a cone in front of the caster take 707 to 772 shadow damage and an additional 644 fire damage over 8 seconds. And it looks like this. There is a couple of talents that this will at least work well with, but we'll worry about that later on. And then the really good ability, let's be honest, you get Demonic Circle Summon. Let me just get rid of this pet, he's really annoying me. And then you could run and move into a different position and be DPSing from over here, you know, throwing some dots on like a boss, and then bang, you can teleport straight back to your portal. So on fights where you need to move to a specific location to stack up, or you just need to get out of a particular range, you know, it's absolutely amazing, and it's only on a 30-second cooldown as well. Right, I feel like that was quite an exhaustive list. So that was, I'd say, every single change that you need to know about when it comes to abilities and what new abilities you get as well. Now, let's get into the talent. So we're going to focus purely on the Destruction tree. We're going to look at the big changes. We're not going to worry too much about minor little changes. We're going to talk about the big changes. Then we're going to look at the glyphs. And then I think you know everything you need to know going into Wrath of the Lich King as a Destruction Warlock. Let's have a look. So starting in the first tier, improved Shadow Bolts changed slightly. So whereas in TBC your Shadow Bolt crits increase the amount of non-periodic shadow damage dealt by 20%, what it does now is increases the damage done by your Shadow Bolt spell by 10%, and your Shadow Bolt has a 100% chance to cause your target to be vulnerable to spell damage, increasing spell critical strike chance against that target by 5%. So yes, you now bring 5% crit and 13% spell damage, which is huge. Bane, which reduces the cast time of your Shadow Bolt, Chaos Bolt, and Immolate spells by half a second, and your Soulfire by 2 seconds, has simply just moved up from tier 2 to tier 1. Aftermath has been reworked, so it used to be 5 points, but now it's only 2, and it's changed so it's not a chance to daze. What it does now is increases the periodic damage done by your Immolate by 6%, and your Conflag has a 100% chance to daze the target for 5 seconds. So a nice talent, useful for the extra damage in both PvE and PvP, and useful for the days in PvP. Due to reducing Aftermath from a 5-point talent to a 2-point talent, you've now got a new one called Molten Skin, which simply is just a flat-out 6% damage reduction talent for 3 points. Cataclysm has also been reduced, so this was in tier 1 and it was a 5-point talent in TBC, which reduced the mana cost of destruction spells by 5%. Instead now for 3 points, it reduces the mana cost of your destruction spells by 10%. Improved Firebolt has now been renamed to Demonic Power, which reduces the cooldown of your Succubus's Lash of Pain spell by 6 seconds, and it also reduces the cast time of your Imp's Firebolt spell by half a second. Ruin and Devastation have now been swapped round, so they're in the same positions, but Ruin is now a 5-point talent and Devastation is a 1-point talent. The next tier remains almost identical, except for the fact Destructive Reach now reduces your threat by an additional 10%. In TBC, it only reduces the threat by 10%. In Wrath of the Lich King, it will reduce it by 20%. Backlash is exactly the same, except you'll notice that it's moved up. In TBC, it sits a lot further down next to Conflag, but it's now actually replaced Pyroclasm. Improved Immolate now increases the damage done by your Immolate spell by 30%, so this is overall the initial damage and the periodic damage, which is a very nice buff in comparison to TBC, where it only increases the initial damage of your Immolate by 25%. The next tier is almost exactly the same, whereas Ember Storm now for 5 points increases the damage done by your fire spells by 15%, up from 10%, and it reduces the cast time of your Incinerate spell by 0.25 seconds. Conflag's changed slightly and changes even more with glyphs, which we'll get onto after the talents. So it consumes an Immolate or a Shadow Flame, and remember, Shadow Flame's our new ability, instantly dealing damage equal to 69% of the Immolate or Shadow Flame, and causes an additional 40% damage over 6 seconds. Notice the word consume. Spoiler alert, there's a glyph where it doesn't, and honestly, it makes a big difference. Soul Leech is exactly the same, except now we've got Chaos Bolt on there as well, which is obviously our final talent, which we'll get to shortly. Pyroclasm has been completely reworked, so whereas before it sat where Backlash is currently, what it actually does now is when you critically strike with Searing Pain or Conflag, your fire and shadow spell damage is increased by 6% for 10 seconds. Shadow and Flame hasn't changed, it's still an additional 20% of your spell power gain for the abilities listed. The only addition here is Chaos Bolt. Improved Soul Leech is a new talent, so your Soul Leech effect also restores mana to you and your summoned demon equal to 2% of maximum mana, and it has a 100% chance to grant up to 10 party or raid members mana regen equal to 1% of maximum mana every 5 seconds. Also known as replenishment. So yeah, Survival Hunter, Shadow Priest, Frost Mage, and even a Destruction Warlock can bring replenishment. And quite honestly, Destruction overall damage on a fight is normally a decent amount lower than Demonology and Affliction. Not massively, especially in tier 7 early on. I don't think Destruction is a spec where you should be like, no, you shouldn't play it. Because actually, just single target consistent damage, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. But if you happen to be a demo lock or an affliction lock and you're in a party and there isn't replenishment and no one can bring replenishment, honestly, you actually playing Destruction, you're still going to bring the 13% extra spell damage if you need that in the group. You're still going to bring the extra 5% crit on the target, and now you can bring replenishment as well. So actually, in terms of benefit in your raid, having a Destruction off-spec is not the worst thing in the world. So final talent-wise in TBC, you'll end on Shadow Fury, which is still there. So everything else is new now. Backdraft. When you cast Conflag, the cast time and global cooldown of your next 3 Destruction spells is reduced by 30%, and it lasts 15 seconds. So this is really nice. After a Conflag, you can get a nice quick few Incinerates out, or couple of Incinerates and a Chaos Bolt. This talent in particular really does pave the way for how the rotation plays as a Destruction Warlock in Wrath. Empowered Imp, so this is why you're going to be using the Imp, because it increases the damage done by your Imp by 30%, and all critical hits done by your Imp have a 100% chance to increase your spell crit hit chance for your next spell by 100%. And this effect lasts 8 seconds. So this is great. Every time your Imp crits, you can be guaranteed to get a nice, big, guaranteed Chaos Bolt crit. Fire and Brimstone increases the damage done by your Incinerate and Chaos Bolt spells to targets afflicted by your Immolate by 10%. And of course, you're always going to have your Immolate on the target. And the critical strike chance of your Conflag spell is increased by 25%, which is huge because we want those Conflag crits, because we want it to be proccing Pyroclasm, which is then going to increase our Shadow and Fire spell damage by 6%. So All of this all really synergizes well. But then finally, the one you're really looking forward to, Chaos Bolt. So a 2-second cast on a 12-second cooldown sends a bolt of chaotic fire at the enemy, dealing 962 to 1221 fire damage. Chaos Bolt cannot be resisted and pierces through all absorption effects. And it just hits bloody hard. And it's great that you can use it, you know, after a conflag. So you're getting backdraft to get the quicker cast time of it as well. It's a really satisfying spell to see crit, I must admit. Not as satisfying as Soulfire, but still really good. And really, because you're wanting to then buff your imp even further, you're going to probably go into the demonology tree. So improved imp, increasing the effect of your imp's firebolt, fire shield, and blood pack spells by 30% is a no-brainer, just to bring health to the party and to make your imp hit even harder. Fell synergy to give you a 100% chance to heal your pet for 30% of the amount of spell damage done by you. Obviously, again, a no-brainer. You're not going to want your imp to die. You'll probably pick up Demonic Embrace, just increasing your total stamina. So where Demonic Embrace used to increase your total stamina, but also reduce your total spirit, now it just increases your total stamina, but it's by 10% instead of 15%. And quite honestly, you're really just making your way down to Demonic Aegis from there. So there's not really a great deal of changes in here, and any changes that there are to talents that you wouldn't take as a destruction build, we'll obviously talk about in the demonology video, hopefully tomorrow. So that's all the talents. I mean, big changes to the talents. You can see the Destruction Warlock's going to play completely different to how it does in TBC. So how it plays in Wrath, just top level, you're either going to be using Curse of Doom or Curse of Elements if you need elements in the group. You're going to be keeping Immolate and you're going to be keeping Corruption up. You're going to be conflagging on cooldown. You're going to be using Chaos Bolt on cooldown, you know, consuming those backdraft procs quickly. And that's it. Rinse and repeat, really. It's not a complicated playstyle, really, because there's not that much to do when you think about it. As long as you've got your dots up, as long as you're conflagging on cooldown and Chaos Bolting on cooldown, then you're just using Incinerate as a filler. It's not overly complicated. But like I say, it's extremely consistent DPS. You haven't got a DPS cooldown as such. Well, you haven't got one really at all in comparison to like getting Metamorphosis as a demo Warlock, or even being able to start spamming Soulfire, you know, at the execute phase. But it's a satisfying spec. So let's just have a quick look at a few destruction glyphs, and then I can get started on the demonology one. We might as well get the minor glyphs out of the way first, because they're pretty useless. This ain't an exhaustive list, it's just the ones that are at least worth buying. So Glyph of Drained Soul is an obvious one that everyone's going to use. So your Drained Soul ability occasionally creates an additional soul shard. You can see why you would use that. It's just free soul shards. This is absolutely amazing. It's just convenient. Glyph of Kilrog, maybe if you wanted to use this, it'll allow your Eye of Kilrog to fly in zones where it can fly, and also increases the movement speed of it by 50%. Glyph of Souls reduces the mana cost of your Ritual Souls spell, what you put down where everyone can get their health stone. Unending Breath can be a nice one situationally, which increases the swim speed of targets affected by your Unending Breath spell by 20%. But honestly, none of these are that great outside of using the Drained Soul. And then for major glyphs, again, just focusing purely on destruction, you've got Glyph of Chaos Bolt, which reduces the cooldown of Chaos Bolt by 2 seconds, which is not too bad, still not one you're probably going to use. You've got Glyph of Conflag, where your Conflag spell no longer consumes your Immolate or Shadow Flame spell from the target. Now, this is an absolute must, because otherwise, once you conflag, you're wasting one charge of your backdraft on getting Immolate up again. Not ideal. Demonic Circle could be another potential, reducing the cooldown of Demonic Circle by 4 seconds. Glyph of Immolate is almost a guaranteed, so it increases the periodic damage done by your Immolate by 10%. Glyph of Imp, not really one you're going to use at endgame, but could be potentially useful while you're leveling, actually, which increases the damage done by your Imp's Firebolt spell by 20%. This is assuming you're using the Imp and not the Voidwalker while you're leveling. Glyph of Incinerate is just a flat out 5% damage buff to your Incinerate, which on the basis Incinerate is your main filler spell. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to use this. Glyph of Shadow Bolt reduces the mana cost of your Shadow Bolt, but again, Warlocks be spamming Incinerate. There is a useful one for PvP, so your Shadow Flame also applies a 70% movement speed slow on its victims. Useful for PvP, so I thought it was worth a mention. And then the big one, which most Warlock specs are going to use. Destruction is arguably the only one not to use it, but I think in low levels of gear, if you've got a decent amount of spirit, it can still be worthwhile. So Life Tap. When you use Life Tap or Dark Pact, you gain 20% of your spirit as spell power for 40 seconds. Now, this is absolutely huge. The reason I say low levels of gear, it's going to be better than at higher levels of gear, because you're probably thinking, well, hang on, I'll have more spirit. Well, that's actually not the case. Once you start getting into ICC, the actual levels of spirit drop massively. But early on in Tier 7, you'll have tons of spirit in comparison to the amount of spell power you've got. And I think every spec of Warlock can make use of Glyph of Life Tap at one time or another. And that's it. That's all the changes. That's all the talents, all the destruction talents, what's changed in those. what glyphs you can get. I'm going to start doing the guides as soon as I finish these. So I'm going to do a guide, an actual guide where I'm raiding in Nax, WOTLK. I've slowly been writing all of the guides up as I'm playing all these classes. Because if you don't know, I've leveled every single one of these classes. I've raided, I've done all the pre-raid, I've done all the heroics on every single one of these classes. So this is all first-hand experience. This isn't me looking at somebody else's video and then copying it. You know, all of this is first-hand experience. So if you appreciate the effort that I'm putting into these videos, please do make sure you like and subscribe. Tomorrow will be Demonology or Affliction. The following day will be whichever one don't come tomorrow. So be sure to look out for those if you are playing a Warlock or plan on maybe even trying a Warlock. Roll the outro. See you on the next one.
There's lots of ways you can support the channel to keep me here putting out World of Warcraft content and covering all future MMOs. Consider joining the channel as a member. You get access to emotes, everyone will know you're a member when you comment on future videos because you get a nice icon next to your name, and you get access to members-only videos, which I'll be putting a lot of on the channel throughout the year. Additionally, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.